Hey guys, welcome back. So jumping back into Symbiote Spider-Man, which is like your Black Suit Saga 1.5, with it starting not long after Secret Wars, and not only showing us that more brutal Spider-Man at the time, but also showing us the struggle of Peter Parker in his personal life after having disappeared for so long, but also with a dash of new events in between. So let's hop back into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so previously we had talked about a bit of the history between Mysterio and Spider-Man, because prior to this point, like 10 times out of 10, Mysterio would use a number of different illusions towards Spider-Man, but eventually Spider-Man would figure it out and he would take him down. But this new narrative really leans into the idea of one, Mysterio noticing the power upgrade for Spider-Man when he returned with the black suit, which at one point in time fought for him when Peter Parker was unconscious, and after seeing that, it really intrigued Mysterio to figure out how he could figure out how to add a piece of this, what he assumed to be technology, to his arsenal. And so now, because of the well-known connection between Black Cat and Spider-Man, this led Mysterio to seek out Black Cat to get a sample of the quote-unquote technology from Spider-Man's suit. And to go a little deeper, because of Mysterio's connection with Jonathan Owen, who works for Wilson Fisk, he had learned a bit more about Felicia's past with Wilson Fisk, with the crimes that she was involved in, and the fact that Wilson Fisk was the person who had given her powers, which she had sought out only to stay closer to Peter in the first place. But with knowing her history, Mysterio figured, okay, I can use this as leverage and blackmail the Black Cat so I can get a piece of the black suit. And initially she wasn't gonna do it, but because of her fear of Peter finding out, with the addition of Peter not really being the easiest to talk to lately, and mainly because of the symbiote, but mostly out of her fear, she makes a decision to help Mysterio in hopes of keeping her secret buried. And so now, after using her very effective methods of distraction, she uses a laser pen which was given to her by Mysterio, takes a piece of the suit, which once again the suit allowed to happen. And when she does this and takes it to secretly meet up with Mysterio, a couple things happen. Because one, when she meets him, not only is she followed by Peter in the symbiote, who goes unnoticed by either her or Mysterio, but after the exchange, when Mysterio goes back to meet with Jonathan Owen, who works for the Kingpin, Peter follows him back there, there's a scuffle, which allows the symbiote to get loose, but after this, Peter leaves. But one of the big things to take notice of here is that this entire time, from watching the meetup to following Mysterio back to Jonathan Owen's laboratory, like this entire time, Peter doesn't say a word, which leads us to believe that the symbiote had just bonded back with Peter and pretty much just used this whole situation to find out where Mysterio was going to. But then when it got too heated, the symbiote caused Peter to leave, but with doing so, leaving behind the piece that Mysterio had taken, which of course then led to that piece of the symbiote finding Mysterio and bonding with him, which from here led Mysterio to want to go figure out how he could get the rest of the suit so that Spider-Man would no longer have the even advantage. And so now, like a few hours later, Peter wakes up and he's back in his bed, and he doesn't really have memories of what had went down with Felicia's meeting and running into the Kingpin, because to him it seems as if he had just went to sleep the night before and just woken up in the same place. And this is something we've seen before recently that of course takes place years later with Eddie Brock, back when the Maker had told him that the symbiote was hiding memories from him. And on top of that, we've also seen situations where in emergencies, the same Venom symbiote had taken over Eddie Brock and just led his injured body to safety. But more recently, like in Maximum Carnage, when the Venom symbiote did this, he was still speaking and communicating. But going back to Peter, this next morning where he wakes up, he gets a call from Aunt May where he realizes that he's late to meet her for breakfast. And this is very important because at this point in time, which is just after Secret Wars, Peter had been dealing with a lot, and it was tough enough keeping a secret from Aunt May prior to this point. But after returning with the symbiote and not having his head on straight and not yet knowing the cause of why, or really even noticing that he wasn't himself, this just made it tougher for him to make that extra time for Aunt May, which he already was doing a bad job at. But after getting this call and rushing to see Aunt May, he's intercepted along the way by symbiote Mysterio, which for Peter, the timing couldn't have been any worse, with him needing to meet up with Aunt May. But a couple things happen here during this fight with Mysterio, and one of them is that Peter goes quiet again, which gives us the indication that he's back in symbiote cruise control, and possibly for the reason that the symbiote just wants to hide this circumstance from Peter, because if Peter finds out, he'll likely get rid of the symbiote. But as far as Mysterio, for him, this is like the best moment of his criminal career, because for him, he's never been able to keep up with Spider-Man, and in this fight, being able to use the symbiote and take down Spider-Man without even using any of his other tricks, which is something he has never done before. But at this point, because Felicia had followed Peter from his apartment all the way to this point, she's able to help him get out the grasp of Mysterio just in time. But with doing so, she also notices that Peter is unresponsive when she's like, "Are you okay, Spider?" and he says nothing, and Mysterio's like, "Yeah, nobody's home. Haven't gotten a word out of him all day," which starts to raise suspicion for the both of them. But real quick, jumping over to Aunt May, who I want to say was supposed to meet up with Peter around like 8 AM, and then after talking to him, another hour passed and he still didn't show, which is something that didn't necessarily surprise her because he stood her up before, but it also fed into her frustration because she had been trying to reach out to Peter over and over again, but it still comes to the same result, which doesn't make it any easier when she's been trying her best to build her relationship back with her nephew. And so now from here, only like a couple blocks away from Aunt May, the fight goes over to the Met Stadium. And at this point, with Mysterio dealing with this double team, he begins to pull out all the stops on Spider-Man using his illusions and the symbiote in order to overwhelm him, take him down, and take the suit, which once again, just like on the train, is just too much for him to take on. But in the case of Felicia, who literally has the power to induce bad luck on her attacker, this causes Mysterio's projections to malfunction to the point of where he decides to mix some of the materials which he uses to create his illusions, but in this case to create fire, to instead shoot out flames at the both of them. And with him doing this, it's very likely a product of the bad luck coming from Black Cat, because immediately after, him doing that actually spooks the symbiote off of him, causing it to return back to Peter, which turns the tables and leaves Mysterio not only without a symbiote but also with a damaged suit, really at this point just leaving him more or less exposed. And so at this point with Peter, who's still, keep in mind, he's still in symbiote cruise control, and I just call it that for lack of a better term. But during this time, he tried to choke out Mysterio, Felicia tried to stop him, and he just shoves her away. But it's here when Mysterio, who does have his contingencies, he shocks Spider-Man in order to get him off of him. But when this happens, Peter appears to be lucid once again, and when he does, it takes him a minute to recognize where he's at and how he got there. But it's at this point that we first begin to see some of Peter's suspicions, with him quote being lucky that she was there. But at this point, Mysterio begins to make these larger distractions, which causes much of the crowd to panic in an attempt to also use this as much of a distraction. But even still at this point, a lot of his holograms, they're still malfunctioning due to Felicia damaging his equipment. But even still with him doing this, like the general public, it still caused them to go into panic, and it's still enough to distract Peter from Mysterio's actual location. But even still with Peter distracted, Felicia spots Mysterio and she's able to take him down before he takes his shot. And with doing so, all the projections and the illusions, they go away. Peter's able to web Mysterio up, and after that, Mysterio, he's pretty much done for the day. But right after this, Peter rushes off to try to catch Aunt May, allowing Felicia to just take it from there and make sure that he doesn't go anywhere before the police arrive. But when Peter leaves and Mysterio comes to, she more or less reminds him that a deal is a deal, and that none of this really changes the agreement that they made, because she doesn't want Peter to know either about her history or her involvement with Mysterio getting a part of the suit. But Mysterio, he's just like, that's the last thing you need to worry about, because when he learns about that suit, he'll get rid of it on his own, and hopefully when he makes that decision, he'll do it before it's too late. But as for Peter, when he arrives at the Pancake Cottage, and man, that sounds good right now. But when he arrives at the Pancake Cottage, Aunt May's already gone. She left him a note, and he doesn't even read it just because he knows that he's messed up again. And when he gets back home and calls Aunt May, who had been waiting for him for over 2 hours, and he tries to make his excuses and set up another time for them to meet, but Aunt May's not hearing that. She just hangs up the phone. And from there, Peter just knows that he's messed up again. But check this out. So with this chapter coming to a close more or less, I want to talk about Felicia for a second, because she's probably low-key or maybe even high-key one of my favorite love interests for the character of Peter Parker, which also makes her one of the things that I'm very much enjoying about Symbiote Spider-Man, because the chemistry between these two before, during, and even times again after the original Black Suit saga, she was very significant for not only showing us where Peter was at that point in time in his life, but even later on when they met up again. And I'm glad Peter David didn't leave that out of Symbiote Spider-Man, nor does he make it seem like she plays a smaller role, because for a long time Peter was very much into her, and when he seen her again, like after he was married to MJ, like all those thoughts came rushing back. And so now we talked about before, I believe in the last Symbiote Spider-Man video, how it went down when Peter found out about Felicia's past and where she got her powers, and though it looks like we're approaching that happening in a slightly different way, I do believe it's ultimately gonna have the same result. And though it may not go as far as him breaking up with her and them getting back together and her using the Foreigner to make him jealous and Doctor Strange removing the bad luck, like I really don't think it's gonna take that exact route, but I have to say that I do appreciate, with all the symbiote madness that's going on right now, that we're getting more Felicia Hardy in the mix of it. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Like, are you digging Symbiote Spider-Man as much as I am? And which parts about it, whether new or nostalgic, are you enjoying the most? And who do you think will get a symbiote next? Because I'm sure before this is done, we'll see a few others suit up, possibly for the first time as a part of this new story. But leave all your thoughts and all your theoretums in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.